This is about the survival of the human race, a sign of the times, an analysis, and a commentary. The continuing Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant disaster. For some time now, it has been hard to escape the continuing flood of bad news from the devastated Fukushima nuclear power plant. Even after the company that operates the plant admitted this summer that tons of contaminated groundwater was leaking into the Pacific Ocean every day, new accidents have added to the uncontrolled releases of radioactive materials. This week, newly tainted rainwater overflowed dikes. 2 weeks before that, workers mistakenly disconnected a pipe, dumping 10 more tons of contaminated water onto the ground and dousing themselves in the process. Those accidents have raised questions about whether the continuing leaks are putting the environment, and by extension the Japanese people, in new danger more than 2.5 years after the original disaster, and long after many had hoped natural radioactive decay would have allowed healing to begin. Interviews with scientists in recent weeks suggest that they are struggling to determine which effects, including newly discovered hotspots on a wide swath of the ocean floor near Fukushima, are from recent leaks and which are leftovers from the original disaster, but evidence collected by them and the plant's operator, the Tokyo Electric Power Company, or TEPCO, shows worrisome trends. The latest releases appear to be carrying much more contaminated water than before into the Pacific, and that flow may not slow until at least 2015, when an ice wall around the damaged reactors is supposed to be completed. Beyond that, although many people believed that the plant had stopped spewing radioactive materials long ago, they have continued to seep into the air. This has been a slowly unfolding environmental misery, said a geochemist at the Geological Survey of Japan who has studied contaminated groundwater flowing from the plant. If we don't put a stop to the releases, we risk creating a new man-made disaster. Both TEPCO and the government say the largest continuing problem, the water releases, is not a cause for concern, because the radiation is diluted in the vast Pacific, supposedly limiting any potentially dangerous effects to the plant's artificial harbor. But while scientists agree that dilution has made radiation levels outside the harbor, and even some places inside, low enough to pass drinking water standards, they say there are worrisome problems that may be the result of new leaks. Besides the discovery of widespread radioactive hotspots, the government's fisheries agency said that more than 1 in 10 of some species of bottom-feeding fish caught off Fukushima are still contaminated by amounts of radioactive cesium above the government's safety level. The latest concerns began in June when TEPCO announced a sharp rise in the amount of radioactive contaminants, including strontium-90, found in groundwater near 2 of the ruined reactors. The company says the source of the increased contamination appears to be highly radioactive water from damaged reactor buildings, while following its natural course from mountains behind the plant down toward the sea. That water, which becomes sullied by radioactive materials from the melted nuclear fuel, is captured and stored in a cityscape of tanks. The magnitude of the recent spike in radiation and the amounts of groundwater involved have led an oceanographer at a government research institute who is considered an authority on radiation in the sea to conclude that radioactive cesium-137 may now be leaking into the Pacific at a rate of about 30 billion becquerels per year, or about 3 times as high as last year. He estimates that strontium-90 may be entering the Pacific at a similar rate, and other scientists suspect that the new releases are having measurable effects beyond the harbor. Blair Thornton, an associate professor at the University of Tokyo's Underwater Technology Research Center, helped find the hotspots, spread across at least 150 square miles of the ocean bottom offshore from the plant. He said they appeared to be formed when radioactive particles like cesium and strontium, which are heavier than water, collect in low points like trenches. Radiation levels there should naturally weaken over time, Dr. Thornton said, as sea currents deposit new sediments on top of toxic particles. The fact that radiation levels are still up to hundreds of times as high as they are in other areas of the seafloor raises the possibility that the spots are being blanketed in new contamination from the plant, he said. The other possibility, Dr. Thornton said, is that radioactive particles released by the original accident bonded to mud on the sea bottom and is not disappearing as quickly as expected. In either case, researchers say, the hotspots are a concern because shrimp and small fish tend to gather in depressions on the ocean floor for protection. If the radioactive materials are entering their bodies, those particles could work their way into the food chain, requiring that fishing be suspended for longer than local fishermen had hoped. The hotspots could explain why cesium-contaminated fish are still being caught off Fukushima, some scientists say, while the number of such fish has been steadily falling. It has not dropped as quickly as expected. Obviously, there's some continuing source of cesium-137, said an oceanographer at the Tokyo University of Marine Science and Technology. We are not sure exactly what is happening, but we are seeing a bigger than expected effect on the environment. Less attention has been paid to the continued airborne releases of cesium from the site's crippled reactors, whose layers of protection were damaged or destroyed. The plant still emits 10 million becquerels per hour into the atmosphere, according to TEPCO, while the amounts of airborne emissions dropped sharply after the accident, which spewed radioactive materials across a wide swath of northeastern Japan. They have held steady since February 2012, TEPCO said. TEPCO has tried to stop these continuing releases by taking steps like erecting a cover over one damaged reactor, but acknowledges that radioactive materials still escape through tiny gaps in the cover or through damaged ventilation systems and cracks in the reactor buildings. So long as such air and water releases continue, experts warn, there will be no end to Fukushima's slowly unfolding environmental damage. These aren't levels that are going to directly affect human health, a researcher at an institute that has monitored cesium in the ocean for the government said, referring to releases into the Pacific. But that doesn't mean that therefore these releases are good or acceptable, he said. There's no precedent for what is happening. So we are on untrodden ground. Again, this is an unfolding man-made disaster that will continue for many years to come. It is also another physical manifestation of the book of Revelation, and it's about what kind of world are we leaving to the future generations, and that should be a very important question to ask. Revelation chapter 16. And I heard a great voice out of the temple, saying to the 7 angels, Go your ways, and pour out the vials of the wrath of God upon the earth. 2. And the first went, and poured out his vial upon the earth. And there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the humans, which had the mark of the beast, and upon them which worshipped his image. 3. And the second angel poured out his vial upon the sea, and it became as the blood of a dead man, and every living soul died in the sea. 4. And the third angel poured out his vial upon the rivers and fountains of waters, and they became as blood. 5. And I heard the angel of the waters say, Thou art righteous, O Lord, which art and was and shall be, because thou hast judged thus. 6. For they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and thou hast given them blood to drink, for they are worthy. 7. And I heard another out of the altar say, Even so, Lord God Almighty, true and righteous are thy judgments. 8. And the fourth angel poured out his vial upon the sun, and power was given unto him to scorch humans with fire. 9. And humans were scorched with great heat, and blasphemed the name of God, which has power over these plagues, and they repented not to give him glory. 10. And the fifth angel poured out his vial upon the seat of the beast, and his kingdom or nation was full of darkness, and they gnawed their tongues for pain. 11. And blasphemed the God of heaven, because of their pains and their sores, and repented not of their deeds. 12. And the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings and leaders of the east might be prepared. And all these are more signs